Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest transformation in your life will not come from others fixing the world around you. It will begin when you assume radical responsibility for your own existence. And that's not just a motivational slogan, it's a psychological law of human development. The world is not obligated to accommodate your feelings, your laziness, or your excuses. The chaos you see around you is often a reflection of the disorder within. If you want to fix your life, start by cleaning your room, both literally and metaphorically. Small actions matter. The moment you take responsibility, even in the smallest areas, you reclaim control. You take back your power. You stop being a victim and start becoming a builder. Discipline and structure are not prisons. They are the very keys to freedom. Most people think freedom means doing whatever they want, whenever they want. But that leads to addiction, distraction, and ultimately destruction. True freedom comes from the ability to direct your impulses, to resist instant gratification, and to voluntarily align your daily actions with your long-term goals. Structure allows you to grow. Discipline gives you strength. Think of it this way: a tree grows strongest when it resists the wind. In the same way, you grow when you lean into the discomfort of discipline and delay pleasure for a higher goal. And speaking of discomfort, do not avoid the things that scare you. Face them. Growth begins where fear lies. Run toward what makes you anxious, not away from it. That's the paradox. You're not supposed to be fearless. You're supposed to face your fears. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it. Every time you confront what you are terrified of, you expand your ability to live fully. Your anxiety shrinks, your confidence grows, and your world becomes larger. If you always do what's easy, your life will be hard. But if you do what's hard, your life will become easier and richer. And here's a truth most people don't want to hear: if you lie to yourself and others, you invite chaos into your life. Reality is not something you can manipulate with fantasies. Truth may hurt, but it's the only thing strong enough to build your life on. You must become honest, not just with others, but brutally honest with yourself. Where are you weak? Where are you lying to feel better? Where are you pretending instead of improving? When you align with the truth, your decisions become clearer, your actions more powerful, and your direction more certain. The burdens of life are unavoidable. You're going to suffer one way or another. The question is not whether you'll carry a burden. It's whether you'll carry it voluntarily. If you take up your responsibilities willingly, with discipline and focus, you become stronger than the weight you carry. If you avoid your burden, it will collapse on you. You will feel lost, resentful, and bitter. So pick up your burden. Aim to be the one in the room who can be relied upon. Make yourself useful, not just to yourself, but to your family, your community, your future. Finally, raise your aim. Set your sights high, not just for what you want, but for who you could become. You're not here to just survive. You're here to grow, to lead, to build something with your life. Your potential is not optional. It is your responsibility to explore. You are capable of far more than you think. But you won't discover it by staying comfortable. You'll find it through challenge, effort, honesty, and purpose. Aim upward and keep climbing. Personal responsibility is not just a suggestion. It is the cornerstone of a meaningful life. When a person begins to understand that they are not merely at the mercy of their circumstances, but in fact a powerful contributor to their own outcomes, everything begins to change. The problem with much of the modern narrative is that it teaches people to look outward for both blame and rescue. It tells them that systems, institutions, or even fate are the primary reasons for their suffering or stagnation. While structural obstacles exist and injustice is real, the greatest tragedy is when individuals hand over the reins of their lives to forces they cannot control, thereby giving up the power they do have. Taking personal responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself for every bad thing that's ever happened. It means recognizing that you are accountable for what you do with your pain, your limitations, and your experiences. If you've been hurt, betrayed, or abandoned, you have every right to feel the weight of that. But you must also understand this: if you stay in that state forever, you become a prisoner of that moment. Responsibility says, I may not be at fault for what happened, but I am responsible for what I do next. That mindset is the beginning of freedom. It's not the comfortable road, but it is the only one that leads forward. When you take full responsibility, you begin to see your daily actions in a new light. Your time matters, your habits matter, your decisions compound. You realize that you are building your life one small choice at a time. Most people wait for motivation, for inspiration, for someone to rescue them or validate their efforts. But those who succeed understand that consistency beats motivation. You don't wait to feel ready, you act because it's your responsibility to shape your future. That changes everything. You stop blaming your boss, your parents, your past, or your environment. You take the power back. With responsibility also comes ownership of your weaknesses. This is where many people run. They want change, but they don't want to look in the mirror. They want a better life without a better self. But self-responsibility demands self-honesty. You have to admit where you're falling short, where you're making excuses, and where you've chosen comfort over growth. That kind of honesty stings, but it's cleansing. It clears the fog and lets you see what needs to change. Responsibility turns pain into fuel, failure into feedback, and criticism into wisdom. It reframes every problem as a challenge to overcome, not a reason to give up. Moreover, taking responsibility invites meaning into your life. When you take ownership, you stop drifting and start aiming. You start asking better questions. What kind of person do I want to become? What legacy do I want to leave? What problems can I solve? Responsibility pulls you into a bigger story, one where your life has weight, your choices have impact, and your presence matters. You are no longer a background character in your own story, you become the protagonist. And in doing so, you begin to carry yourself with a different kind of strength, not arrogance, but authority. Not ego, but integrity. And when you fail, and you will, you don't collapse under guilt. Responsibility teaches you how to fail properly. Not to wallow in shame, but to learn. To analyze your mistakes, extract wisdom from them, and move forward with greater awareness. Failure is not the opposite of responsibility. It is the training ground for it. You fall, but you fall forward. That's how resilience is built. Ultimately, personal responsibility is the highest form of self-respect. It is saying to yourself, I believe I matter enough to rise above mediocrity. I believe my life is valuable enough to not waste it. I will no longer live on autopilot. I will not hand over my destiny to the opinions of others or the circumstances around me. I will rise. I will build. I will become who I was meant to be. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. And that one shift, from blame to responsibility, can change the entire trajectory of your future. The human brain is not just an organ of thought, it is a tool for transformation. When you begin to understand how your mind works, you realize that your thinking shapes your perception, and your perception shapes your reality. That's not just a philosophical idea. It's a psychological truth. You are not born with a fixed mindset or limited mental potential. Your brain is highly plastic, meaning it can rewire itself based on what you repeatedly do, think, and focus on. This means you are never truly stuck unless you allow yourself to be. The person you are today is not the end of the story. It is only the current draft. And every thought you allow, every belief you accept, every habit you practice. These are the edits that shape the next version of you. What many people fail to realize is that your life is a reflection of your patterns of thought. If you constantly tell yourself you're not good enough, not smart enough, not capable, you will act accordingly. Your mind is always listening, and it is always building a world consistent with the narrative you feed it. This is why taking control of your thinking is so powerful. It is not about ignoring reality or sugarcoating problems. It's about choosing thoughts that align with who you want to become, not who you've been. If you want to change your life, you must begin by changing the way you think. It may sound simple, but it is not easy. It takes deep effort to recognize and replace the mental scripts that have been running on repeat for years, sometimes decades. The problem is that most people never challenge their thoughts. They treat every fear, every doubt, every inner voice of limitation as if it's a truth handed down from the sky. But it's not. Much of what you believe was learned through your upbringing, through culture, through past pain. And anything learned can be unlearned. If you grew up thinking you'll never amount to anything, that failure defines you, or that success is for others, those aren't facts. They're inherited scripts. And the incredible truth is that you can tear those scripts up and write new ones. But it takes courage, it takes effort, it takes discipline, and above all, it takes awareness. The kind of deep, conscious awareness that stops you mid-thought and says, wait, is this belief helping me or hurting me? Reprogramming your mind doesn't mean pretending problems don't exist. It means looking your challenges in the eye and refusing to be defined by them. It means learning to think critically, to analyze your emotions without being enslaved by them, and to train your thoughts the way an athlete trains their body. You begin to direct your mental focus toward what builds you, not what breaks you. You focus on solutions, on progress, on long-term growth. You speak to yourself with clarity, not confusion, with strength, not shame. And over time, something remarkable happens. Your thoughts begin to serve your goals instead of sabotaging them. The reality is, your external circumstances may be tough, but your internal world doesn't have to reflect that chaos. You can learn to build a fortress within your mind, a place of discipline, order, and direction. But no one will build it for you. You must do the mental work. You must decide what kind of thoughts are worthy of your attention. Because every moment you allow your mind to wander into fear, envy, procrastination, or resentment, you are feeding the future you don't want. But when you train your thoughts toward gratitude, focus, responsibility, and possibility, you begin to attract the future you do want, not by magic, but by mental discipline. The greatest shift in your life will not come from changing your job, your city, or your relationships. It will come from changing your thinking. Because once your thinking changes, everything else follows. Your energy shifts, your decisions evolve, your habits improve, and your future opens up. That's the power of the human mind when guided not by fear, but by intention. And you have that power right now. Most people drift through life without a clear sense of direction, and the consequences of that are immense. When you live without purpose, your life becomes reactive instead of proactive. You begin to respond to the demands of others, to the pressure of society, to the distractions of entertainment, and to the pull of comfort. Days blur into weeks, weeks into years, and suddenly you find yourself wondering how you got so far off track. The absence of purpose leads to stagnation, confusion, and a kind of quiet desperation that eats away at your soul. But when you identify a clear purpose, everything changes. You begin to align your time, energy, and decisions around something meaningful, and that clarity becomes your compass in a chaotic world. Purpose isn't something you find lying on the street. It is something you build. It comes from exploration, from reflection, from facing your pain and asking, what am I here to contribute? It's not about chasing happiness or avoiding discomfort. It's about choosing a mission worth the struggle. Because once you discover a deep reason for your existence, you are willing to endure hardship, to resist temptation, to sacrifice fleeting pleasures for lasting fulfillment. You wake up not asking, what do I feel like doing? But what must I do today to honor this calling? That shift in mindset, from passive to purposeful, is what separates those who merely survive from those who truly live. A purpose-driven life doesn't mean everything becomes easy. On the contrary, it means you now have the responsibility to live with intention. Purpose adds weight to your choices. It holds you accountable to your potential. It demands consistency, discipline, and courage. But it also gives back far more than it takes. It gives you energy in the face of exhaustion. It gives you clarity when you're surrounded by noise. It gives you resilience when life tries to knock you down. With purpose, your actions become aligned, your distractions lose their power, and your progress accelerates. Even your failures take on new meaning because they become lessons in service of your larger goal. The problem is, many people expect purpose to be something perfect, grand, or glamorous. But purpose can start small. It can begin with a commitment to serve, to grow, to build something that lasts. It might be rooted in your own pain, a desire to help others avoid the suffering you've endured. Or it might be born from your curiosity, your skills, your longing to contribute to something greater than yourself. Whatever form it takes, Your purpose becomes the anchor that holds you steady in storms, and the fire that pushes you forward when you're tempted to quit. Without purpose, life becomes a series of distractions and detours. But with purpose, you become a force of direction. You begin to say no to what doesn't serve your mission and yes to what strengthens it. You stop waiting for motivation and start relying on commitment. And that's the key. Real purpose turns wishes into willpower. It transforms fleeting inspiration into enduring action. You no longer ask life to be easy. You ask yourself to be strong enough to meet its challenges. You stop living for the approval of others and start living for the standards you've set for yourself. The truth is, you don't need permission to live a purposeful life. You need a decision. A choice to take your life seriously enough to ask the hard questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What legacy am I leaving? And once you answer those questions, even in part, your path begins to unfold. Not all at once, but step by step, day by day. You don't need certainty, you need direction. And once you choose that direction, your life begins to move with power. Not because the road is smooth, but because you now have a reason to keep walking, even when it gets rough. That's the difference purpose makes. It's not a feeling, it's a foundation. And it can change everything. Discipline is not a punishment, it is a path to freedom. Many people misunderstand this concept. They see discipline as something restrictive, something that cages them and takes away their spontaneity and joy. But in reality, discipline is the very foundation of true freedom. Without discipline, you're a slave to your impulses, your emotions, your distractions. You're constantly tossed around by what feels good in the moment rather than what builds a meaningful future. But with discipline, you become the architect of your own life. You gain the ability to delay gratification, to stay committed to a course of action, and to rise above the temporary noise that so often derails people from their goals. It's easy to let yourself off the hook. It's easy to say, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'm too tired, or I don't feel motivated. But the people who truly change their future are those who act regardless of how they feel. Discipline doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It doesn't rely on motivation, which is fleeting. Instead, it builds habits, routines, and structures that support you even when you don't feel like showing up. That's when transformation happens, not when it's easy, but when it's hard and you do it anyway. Every time you show up when you don't want to, you strengthen your identity. You prove to yourself that you are reliable, capable, and worthy of the goals you claim to desire. Discipline is what bridges the gap between intention and achievement. Everyone has dreams. Everyone wants to succeed, to be better, to create a future that reflects their highest potential. But wanting isn't enough. Wishing isn't enough. Discipline is what turns vague desires into concrete actions. It's what gets you out of bed early when others are sleeping. It's what pushes you to keep studying, working, improving, even when the results aren't immediate. Discipline is patient. It understands that growth is slow, that mastery takes time, and that consistency will always beat intensity in the long run. The truth is, the most successful people aren't always the most talented or the most intelligent. They're the ones who kept showing up. The ones who didn't let their emotions control their actions. The ones who decided, day after day, to do what needed to be done. They made discipline a way of life. They created systems that supported their goals, environments that reinforced their values, and boundaries that protected their focus. That's not luck, it's intentional design. And anyone can do it if they're willing to trade short-term comfort for long-term excellence. You need to understand that discipline compounds. Every small act of self-control, every choice to do the hard thing instead of the easy one, adds up. Over time, those choices shape your character. They build resilience, confidence, and mental toughness. And eventually, the person who used to struggle with consistency becomes the person others admire for their relentless work ethic. But that doesn't happen overnight. It happens one decision at a time, repeated consistently until it becomes who you are. There will always be distractions. There will always be temptations, setbacks, and days when quitting feels easier than continuing. But discipline gives you the ability to say, I'm not going to let this moment define me. It lets you rise above your circumstances and act according to your values instead of your moods. And that's where real strength comes from, not from avoiding weakness, but from mastering it. Discipline isn't glamorous. It's not always exciting, but it is powerful. And if you want to build a future that reflects your potential instead of your excuses, discipline must be your foundation. Because in the end, it's not what you say you want that shapes your life. It's what you're willing to consistently work for. Pain is not your enemy. In fact, pain might be the most honest teacher you'll ever have. It reveals your weaknesses without mercy, highlights your blind spots without apology, and introduces you to parts of yourself that comfort would never allow you to meet. Most people spend their lives running from pain, emotional, physical, mental, chasing comfort like it's the goal of existence. But in doing so, they never grow, they never stretch, they never evolve. Because true transformation only begins when you step into discomfort willingly, when you look pain in the eye and say, "I'm not afraid of what you'll show me." When life hurts, when you're knocked down, when it feels like everything is falling apart, that's not the end. It's an invitation. An invitation to become someone stronger, wiser, deeper. Pain strips away the superficial. It forces you to confront what really matters. It humbles you. It makes you question your assumptions, your identity, your plans. And in that brokenness, there is clarity. There is honesty. That's when you realize what you've been relying on. People, possessions, approval may have been a fragile foundation all along. Pain forces you to rebuild, but this time with depth, with purpose, with truth. Think about the strongest people you've ever met. The ones with wisdom in their eyes, calm in their voice, unshakable presence in a crisis. Do you think they became that way by living an easy life? No, they were forged in fire. They've faced heartbreak, betrayal, failure, loss. They've sat alone in silence, wrestling with fear, grief, and confusion. But instead of collapsing, they learned. They didn't let the pain turn them bitter. They let it turn them brave. That kind of strength isn't gifted. It's earned. Through suffering, through reflection, through endurance. You don't choose the pain, but you do choose what it makes of you. There's something sacred about enduring what you thought would break you. Pain builds resilience, and resilience is what will carry you when motivation fails and the path becomes unclear. The world tells you to avoid discomfort at all costs, to take the easy route, to numb your struggles. But everything valuable in life, growth, love, purpose, success, it all demands a willingness to endure. There's no shortcut around pain, but if you stop running from it, if you start seeing it as a teacher rather than a threat, then you can use it. You can let it sculpt you, not scar you. Pain also connects us. It reminds us of our shared humanity. Everyone suffers. Everyone carries invisible wounds. And when you've walked through your own darkness, you develop the capacity to walk with others through theirs. You become more compassionate, more grounded, more real. The kind of person who doesn't offer shallow advice, but offers presence, understanding, and truth. That kind of person is rare, and the world needs more of them. So the next time pain comes, don't hide. Don't numb. Don't distract yourself until it passes. Sit with it. Listen to what it has to say. Ask yourself what it's teaching you. And above all, remember this pain is not the end of your story. It's a chapter, yes, but one that can be used to shape a far more powerful conclusion. The version of you on the other side of pain is stronger than the one you are now. But you have to go through it. You have to grow through it. Because comfort may keep you safe, but pain is what makes you strong. You must understand that life is not meant to be navigated without responsibility. In fact, your future depends entirely on how much responsibility you're willing to shoulder. Modern culture often glamorizes freedom, freedom from rules, from expectations, from structure. But freedom without responsibility is chaos. It leads to emptiness. It produces people who drift through life, blaming the world for their dissatisfaction, while never realizing they've been avoiding the very thing that gives life its meaning. Responsibility isn't a burden, it's the pathway to significance. When you take responsibility for your actions, your thoughts, your habits, your future, you gain control. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming the architect of your destiny. Responsibility transforms you. It forces you to grow up. It demands that you organize yourself, that you confront your limitations, and that you build the strength necessary to bear the weight of your own existence. The most powerful people in the world are not those who control others, but those who have mastered themselves. And that mastery only comes when you assume responsibility not only for your successes, but also for your failures, your flaws, your fears. It's in the process of owning your imperfection that you begin to cultivate real strength. You don't get to blame your parents forever. You don't get to use your past as a crutch. The world owes you nothing. But you owe it to yourself to rise beyond the hand you were dealt. No one else can walk this path for you. Now, responsibility does not mean perfection. It doesn't mean you'll never fall or fail. What it means is that when you do fall, you don't make excuses. You stand back up. You recalibrate. You ask yourself, what could I have done differently? And then you do it. That mindset of relentless self-evaluation and personal ownership is what separates those who rise from those who stagnate. It's easy to live passively. It's easy to scroll through life, to waste time, to complain. What's hard is choosing discipline over distraction. What's hard is holding yourself accountable when no one else is watching. But if you can develop that level of integrity with yourself, there is no limit to who you can become. Taking responsibility is the foundation of leadership, of your own life, and eventually of others. People follow those who carry weight without collapsing. People respect those who hold themselves to a higher standard. When you become that kind of person, someone who shows up consistently, who keeps promises, who builds rather than blames, you not only elevate yourself, but you inspire those around you. Responsibility creates ripple effects. Your discipline becomes someone else's motivation. Your stability becomes someone else's anchor. You want to change your future. Then take full, unapologetic ownership of your present. Take responsibility for your health, your mindset, your finances, your relationships, your time. Stop waiting for someone to rescue you. No one is coming. You are your own rescue plan. That truth might sting at first, but it's the most liberating realization you'll ever have. Because once you stop waiting, you start building. You start learning. You start becoming. Responsibility isn't about control. It's about contribution. It's about asking not just, what do I want from life? But what does life need from me? It's about stepping into the discomfort of maturity and choosing meaning over pleasure, purpose over ease. And in that space, in that hard-earned ground, you find not just success, but fulfillment. Because the future doesn't belong to the entitled. It belongs to those who accept the challenge of life, who rise with resolve, and who understand that true freedom is only found on the other side of deep, personal responsibility.